And now it is time for Formula Robin's mid-season review. We're halfway through the summer break, and I don't know about you all, but I'm itching for Formula One to return. So I thought it would be the perfect time to rank the drivers at the midway point of the season. I also thought it might be fun to give my picks for the highlights and lowlights of the season so far. Completely unbiased, of course. Alright, we'll start with P20, and with a rating of 2 out of 10, I have Nicholas Latifi. Oh, go Tiffy. We really hoped you could harness the power of Nutella and improve in your third year of Formula One, but it has been horrendous. The only good race has been Britain, due to an unexpected Q3 appearance in wet conditions at Silverstone. Hungary was looking so good with a P1 finish in FP3, but a final corner screw-up in Quali meant P20 again. The man has just not been able to sort out the new car regs, and there have been ridiculous crashes from absolutely nowhere. The collision with Stroll in Australia and crashing in the hairpin under safety car in Monaco were frankly embarrassing. The man has been outclassed by his teammate, who has been out of F1 for a year. Latifi seems like such a good guy, but that is sadly the only thing he has brought to the table. In P19, with a rating of 3 out of 10, I have Lance Stroll. Part of this is due to how terrible of a car the Aston Martin is, but I can't really think of one positive moment from this year for Lance. He's had a couple races where he's managed to make his way up the field to secure a P9 or P10, and for this reason I think he has the most overtakes so far this year. But other than that, it's been a pretty anonymous year for my fellow countrymen. Stroll has had a few abysmal moments though, including that collision with Latifi, and also colliding with the wall behind a safety car in Monaco. Must be a Canadian thing. If not for his father, Lance would be out of his seat for next year. Now in P18, with the rating of 3.5 out of 10, I have Yuki Tsunoda. This may be a bit low compared to others, but hear me out. Yuki has had a couple decent races in 2022, most notably Imola and Baku, at least before he had to duct tape his rear wing. But he's also made some incredibly boneheaded errors. These include crashing into the wall straight out of the pit lane in Canada, actively costing Gasly a chance at a great quali in Monaco, where they actually seem to have pace, and the biggest cardinal sin of all, taking out his teammate in Silverstone. While he has been close to Pierre this year on quali pace and has matured as a driver, he has been costing both his teammate and team points on the rare weekends they have been good, which is something some of the drivers ahead of him on this rating haven't been doing. In P17, also with a score of 3.5 out of 10, I have Mick Schumacher. Before Silverstone, Mick would have been rated only slightly higher than Latifi, honestly, but his performances in Britain and Austria were fantastic. We saw hints of his dad and his demeanor in Austria, and it was great to see. His start to the year, though, was absolutely brutal. Mick has racked up the biggest bill from crashes so far this year, with a scary one in Quali in Saudi Arabia costing him the ability to race, as well as the crash in Monaco. It's never good to see a car in two pieces. He also crashed into his mentor Seb in Miami, which was an unforced error in a weekend he could have gotten his first points. I think that put a lot of pressure on Mick, and now that he's finally achieved his first points finish, things should hopefully improve in the second half. Just no more crashes, please. In P16, as much as it pains me to say it, I have Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel has always been a driver to stay out of trouble, but this year he's had a few incidents. A slight wiggle off the curb in Imola meant a collision with Sainz that cost him a potential points finish on a weekend where his teammate finished on the podium. He also spun Lance Stroll in Hungary, although this was probably more so McLaren's fault for putting him on useless hard tires. The biggest disappointment for Daniel in 2022 has been his quali pace, though. There have been weekends where Daniel has been a solid 7 or 8 tenths off Lando's pace, and a good weekend for him is 2 or 3 tenths off. In a season where the midfield is so tight, it has meant frequent Q2 oustings for the Aussie. It just seems to me that Danny has lost his passion for racing. He has no joyous radio messages, no pushback against team orders, just understood. Daniel needs to get as far away as possible from that McLaren car, honestly. Might be a blessing in disguise that Piastri likely has his seat for 2023. P15 is a driver who has also not been up to his typical standard, and it's Pierre Gasly with a 4.5 out of 10. I think a lot of it is the fact that AlphaTauri is a toaster on wheels, but I think the new regulations have been difficult for him to adjust to. The team and Yuki have both been letting him down a lot, but he has also gotten into a few incidents this year. Sprint races also continue to not be his friend, having been taken out in both Imola and Austria. Pierre just doesn't have the same spark that he once did. Part of me thinks it might have something to do with that Red Bull seat seemingly once again slipping from his grasp. Definitely not liked by Pierre Gasly. Now we are reaching the drivers I have given a passing grade to. First up in P14 with a 5 out of 10, I have Zhou Guanyu. Having not known much about Zhou coming into the season, I have been impressed with how calm and collected he is behind the wheel, and he has exceeded my expectations. I don't recall him making many rookie mistakes so far this year. The man has just been incredibly unlucky with so many mechanical DNFs, so it's been tough to get a full read on his driving ability. He's been pretty middle of the road and is frequently a few spots from the points. I think he just needs to be a little bit more aggressive to make up a few spots in the races, but I think he's done enough to warrant a seat in 2023. P13 is Sebastian Vettel with a 5.5 out of 10. In hindsight, looking back on Seb's races this year, it seems pretty clear he was going to retire. Seb is just out for his victory lap of the F1 circuit and suffering from senioritis. Similar to his teammate, he has managed to drag that tractor of an Aston Martin from the back of the grid to P9, but he at least had a fantastic result in Baku, finishing P6. Seb just loves that place. We are seriously going to miss the guy and all he does for the sport off track. He just seems to have lost that competitive edge and doesn't want to spend the next few years at the back of the track. In P12, I have Kevin Magnussen with a 5.5 out of 10. This game is quite a surprise to me considering his fantastic start in Bahrain with a 5th place finish. Super impressive considering the lack of preparation he had coming into the season. Since then though, he's only had a few more points finishes, even though he has qualified quite well. There have been 2 or 3 races where he has gotten into a first lap incident with someone, usually Hamilton, which has led to damage to his front wing and a meatball flag waved in his direction, immediately ruining his race. Kevin can just be much too aggressive when he needs to play the long game and recognize what he can achieve in that car. Otherwise, it might be Gunther Steiner who is fuck-smashing doors. In P11 with a rating of 6 out of 10, I have Alex Albon. I seriously wonder what Albon would be capable of in a car that isn't a complete turd, because he has had some incredible drives this season. Getting that Williams to P10 in Australia by going on hards for nearly the whole race was a sight to behold. He managed to do in 3 races what took Russell 2.5 years to do. Albon has had a few collisions though, including with Stroll in Saudi Arabia and Vettel in Austria. Other than that, he's been pretty consistently finishing between P10 and P13. I don't think he could do much more than that in that dumpster on wheels. Now on to the top 10, and with a 6.5 out of 10, I have Valtteri Bottas. Bottas stormed out of the gate in an Alfa Romeo that looked to have returned to the glory of the Sauber days. However, since then, reliability and a gradual decline in pace relative to the field have meant less points for Bottas. He still manages to qualify quite well though, even beating Mercedes on a few occasions. There are some weeks though where he just doesn't seem to have it. It doesn't seem to bother him too much though, as Bottas just seems so comfortable in that Alfa. Well deserved after many one-year contracts. We should hopefully have many more years of butt picks to come. In P9, I have a driver who seems to constantly get overlooked, and that is Esteban Ocon for a 7 out of 10. Bestie just consistently puts in solid races and finishes in the points. He may not have the flash and pizzazz of his teammate, but he does currently have more points. He has gotten a bit lucky this year though, with only 1 mechanical DNF to his name. There are some weeks where he doesn't have the pace and quality, but it doesn't seem to impact his ability to place between P6 and P9 week in and week out. Put some respect on the guy's name. He might have to drive solo for Alpine next year at the rate they keep losing drivers. At P8, I have placed Carlos Sainz at a 7.5 out of 10. Carlos has had quite the roller coaster of a year. He has a certain fondness for gravel traps, which has led to 2 DNFs. Then he's had a hydraulics failure and an engine explosion. But he has also made some great calls on strategy when Ferrari tried to make him do something completely unhinged. And he finally managed to attain that first pole and victory in Silverstone. He's still a bit off Leclerc's pace on most weekends though, and needs to be better at taking advantage on weekends Charles isn't there to fight for victory. He has been slowly improving as the year goes on though. Sergio Perez, meanwhile, has been the opposite, with a fantastic start where he was outpacing Max in some cases, but has slowly been falling back to earth. so I have him in P7, also at a 7.5 out of 10. Sergio has arguably had both the most impressive pole and most impressive victory of the year. That lap around Saudi Arabia was stunning with how on the edge he was, and his Monaco victory was a strategy masterclass. But the past 3 races in Austria, France, and Hungary were not good at all. As the car has developed, it has shifted closer to Max and away from Checo, and he is slowly falling to the struggles that plagued the Red Bull second drivers of old. Checo has also had a couple abysmal qualifying sessions, particularly the crash in Canada and the absolute stinkers in Austria and Hungary going out in Q2. So much for Sergio's chance at a driver's title. In P6, I have Lando Norris for an 8 out of 10, a full 10 spots ahead of his McLaren teammate. Kinda like some quali sessions this year. Lando was the only driver not in Red Bull, Ferrari, or Mercedes to score a podium this year, and that tells you all you need to know. Lando was able to quickly adapt in a McLaren car with absolutely horrendous brakes and straight line speed. He's had a few impressive qualifying sessions, and although he often falls back in the race, he seems to always be on for a best of the rest finish of P7. The only major mistake this year was the collision with Gasly, but he wasn't getting any points that race anyways. In P5, I have Magic Alonso at an 8.5 out of 10. If this man had an ounce of luck, he would be trouncing Esteban and maybe even be ahead of Lando. His only mistakes have been late race penalties costing him positions. He has had 2 astounding qualifying sessions, the P2 in Canada and the near stonking lap in Australia before his hydraulics gave out. I wouldn't be surprised if he managed to pole this year. I'm hoping that if there is a crazy race, he is able to get a win. He has been a wonder to watch and drums up chaos wherever he goes. I just hope he doesn't come to regret his move to Aston Martin. Also at an 8.5 out of 10, I have Mr. Saturday, Mr. Consistent, Mr. Shirtless on Instagram, Mr. George Russell for P4. In every race he has finished, George has been top 5. He would have been P3 in these rankings if not for the incredible run of form his teammate has been on lately. He has done something his teammate hasn't though, and that is putting the porpoising arrow on pole. The Silverstone crash was his fault though, and he also got into trouble with Checo on the first lap of Austria. Other than that though, he's been flawless in a car that is off the pace of the top 2 teams, but still manages to make up points when they fail. Up next in P3 at an 8.5 out of 10 is Lewis Hamilton. Lewis really struggled at the start of the year, particularly with car setup and porpoising. However, we've learned recently that was due to him trying all sorts of experimental setups to gather data to improve the car. The Q1 knockout in Saudi Arabia, a brutal P13 finish at Imola, and the crash in Austria qualifying were all uncharacteristic of the 7-time world champ. However, the 5 podium places in a row, including 2 second-place trophies, have been impressive, considering the Mercedes is still the 3rd fastest car. It's only a matter of time before he snatches a victory this year. The top 2 drivers this year have been clear from the start. In P2, to no one's surprise, is Charles Leclerc at a 9 out of 10. Even though Ferrari have been an absolute dumpster fire around him, Charles has been virtually flawless this year. That was up until the crash from the lead in dry conditions in France. The spin in Imola also cost Charles, but on 1-lap pace, the guy just can't be beat. My one critique of Charles is that he needs to be more assertive on team radio when the team is making strategy decisions. Charles is such a team player, but knowing when to put his foot down and take strategic decisions into his own hands is something he's going to need to learn to do in order to have a chance at a championship, because Ferrari sure as hell won't be making the right decisions in that regard. And finally, P1 is Max Verstappen. While he has not been as quick as Charles in qualifying, the guy just can't be beat on race pace. He has 8 out of 13 victories so far this year. Anytime Ferrari makes a mistake, he is there to capitalize, even on weekends where the Red Bull has been slower. The guy just doesn't make mistakes, and even when he does, it doesn't faze him, and he still manages to make the most of the situation. He dragged a piece of AlphaTauri end plate in his floor to a P7 at Silverstone, and in Hungary spun around but still managed to win the race from a P10 grid start. The run of form that Max has been on since the start of the pandemic has been unbelievable, and as much as I don't like the guy, I have to respect it. Now before I get into the highlights and lowlights of the season so far, I'd just like to take this opportunity to ask you to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video so far. It's my goal to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this season, and so far only about 20% of those of you who watch my channel are subscribed, so it would really help me out if you could. Alright, now time for some highlights and lowlights of the season. For best moment, in P3, I have Alonso's P2 in Canada qualifying. It is so impressive that the guy still has it at 40. He just seems like he could race forever. In P2, I have the double DNF for Red Bull in Bahrain. I told you guys that this was going to be unbiased. Oh, Bahrain. Back when we thought that Ferrari were going to run away with the championship. Oh, how I miss those days. And in P1, it is through goes Hamilton. Those laps after the safety car in Silverstone were some of the best wheel-to-wheel racing I have ever seen. I really hope that we can get the entire field that close together to be able to experience racing like that every week. For worst moment, in P3, I have McLaren's struggles in Bahrain. It seems like so long ago now, but I hated every moment. Destroyed all my hopes and dreams for the team in one fell swoop, and the team is still recovering from it. In P2, it's Charles's crash from the lead in France. It was the moment that marked the end of any title hopes for Leclerc and any hope of an exciting championship battle for fans. I'll never get over it. And P1 is the first lap crash at Silverstone. Seeing Joe's car upside down in the background of a shot and then not hearing anything or seeing anything about it for an extended period of time was terrifying. I'm so glad both him and Albon were okay after an incident like that. Once again, thank God for the halo. For the best overtakes, in P3, I have Ricciardo on the Alpines in Hungary. Maybe it was due to the hard tires on the Alpines. Maybe things just opened up for him to go up the inside. For a brief moment, we saw the Ricciardo of old, and it was glorious. In P2, I have Alonso passing Yuki on the grass in Austria. The finger wag. The finger wag. Alonso is unhinged. And P1 is Charles Leclerc's pass around the outside of Lewis Hamilton at Copse on Old Hards. The man has no fear, and the car control was immaculate. So impressive. Radio was tricky, because it seems like this year the drivers haven't been joking around as much as usual. So in P3 is Checo sneezing, going 200 miles per hour in Hungary. F1 drivers are a different breed, but also sneezing while driving in general is just not pleasant. P2, as painful as it was, is Charles' scream in France. It is so rare that we see genuine emotion from the drivers. Charles has said that he wishes he had turned the radio off, as he prefers to keep moments like that to himself. But the insight into his emotions in that moment was heartbreaking. And P1 is Lance Stroll's scream in a Monaco qualifying. Because it was hilarious, and I don't think I've ever laughed that hard at anything in years. It still gets me. Next is off-track moments. In P3, I have Ferrari whoring out their drivers on TikTok. I don't think this requires any further explanation. I have been hydrated all year on thirst traps. And before you say anything about me only watching F1 for the drivers, consider por qué no las dos. In P2, it is Seb on the scooter in Australia. The man looked like Toad going around Rainbow Road, an absolute icon. Never change, Seb. Never change. And P1 is obviously Daniel Ricciardo absolutely murking Lando with a space hopper. And the subsequent jittery exchange that followed. I think Daniel actually wants to murder his teammate. One way to keep his seat, I guess. And finally, post-race moments. I have Max losing his hat driving around Austria in P3. Serves him right for constantly covering up his messy post-race hair. P2 is Carlos being shirtless in the cooldown room. I am a heterosexual woman with eyeballs. It was much appreciated and added to the unhinged Miami post-race activities. And finally, P1 is Charles Leclerc using the ground to get a pen to work after Quali in Bahrain. I feel like this moment perfectly encapsulates who Charles is as a person. He is able to be the most impressive driver in F1, putting the car on pole, and then has no brain cells left for common sense. I can relate, honestly. Well, that is my review of the 2022 season so far. Only 9 races left to go, and I can't wait to see what happens. Bye!